think I sent it to YouTube Live and I'll monitor that. There's usually just a couple people over on YouTube. Um, and if everybody's ready, I'll bring everyone in.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to What's New in Historical Fiction. I'm your host, Colin Mustful. I'm the founder of History Through Fiction, an independent press that publishes historical novels. Today's What's New in Historical Fiction, we do this about once every month or two. This is a little bit different. Most of the authors and the titles that I have on this panel are kind of general historical fiction. It's usually not a series. Today's a little bit different where we have some Regency era mystery and romance and elements like that. And these authors have all written series. So I'm a little bit out of my element, but I'm really glad to have these historical fiction authors on, and I'm really excited to dive into their books. And I'm glad all of you could join us for What's New in Historical Fiction. Just a couple housekeeping things real quick. You can turn your cameras on or off. You can turn your mics on or off. I would appreciate if you would just mute your mic so there are no distractions, and we can just go on with the discussion. Please, though, say hello in the chat. Just say hi. Let us know where you're joining us from. Maybe something that you're reading right now or looking forward to, anything at all to engage with us. You can engage in the chat throughout the event. If you have any questions at all, any thoughts, comments, go ahead and post them in the chat. I will be monitoring that throughout the event. After some discussion with these authors, I will invite questions from the audience, and I'll just facilitate those and ask our authors. I also have a link to a landing page with all of our authors' books. I'll post that a couple times in the chat throughout the event, and that shows each one of our authors' most recent novels and the synopsis, and also a link to bookshop.org. We want to support bookshop.org because they support independent booksellers. They give a portion of the sales to indie booksellers. So without further ado, I'm going to remove myself from the screen and we'll introduce our authors. First, let's start with Hannah Linder, author of The Red Cottage. Hannah, if you could just say hello and let us know a little bit about your novel.
Hello. I'm Hannah Linder, and my newest novel is The Red Cottage, and it is a Regency romantic suspense. It's published with Barber Publishing. I have 6 out with them so far, and 1 more coming soon.
Thank you, Hannah. Next, we have Syrie James, author of Danger at Darkmoor Park. Syrie, hi.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here with all of you very amazing ladies. I want to explain that I am really sick with a cold, but I'm going to do my best, even though my voice is iffy. And if I have to mute myself or turn off my video every now and then, I hope you'll understand why. Do you want me to just talk about my new book or about the series?
Why don't you just start with the new book?
So my new book is my 16th novel, and it's called Danger at Darkmoor Park. And it's book 3 in the Audacious Sisterhood of Smoke and Fire series. And it's a Christmas murder mystery romance. And it's about Selena Taylor, who's snowbound at a remote country house over Christmas time in Yorkshire while co-hosting a holiday gathering. When a guest dies, and just before he dies, he gives her a cryptic clue to a hidden cache of money. And so a charismatic doctor arrives out of the storm, and the two of them work to solve the mystery, search for hidden treasure, and are trapped with guests who all seem to be hiding a secret. So it's the perfect read to curl up with over the holidays.
Definitely sounds like it. Next, we have Vanessa Kelly, author of Murder at Donwell Abbey.
Hi, thank you for having me here. It's really great to be with all of you. Yes, and this is Murder at Donwell Abbey, which is also a winter setting. It's right after the holidays, and it's the second book in the Emma Knightley mystery series, featuring Jane Austen's iconic character, Emma Woodhouse, now Emma Knightley, because she's finally married her Mr. Knightley. And the short version is Jane Austen's Emma solving murders in her little village of Highbury. So she's switched out her matchmaking cap for sleuthing, amateur sleuthing. And I'm happy to say she's much better at solving murders than she is at matchmaking.
Thank you, Vanessa. Finally, we have Mary Winters, author of Murder in Matrimony.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here tonight with these lovely ladies and all of you. This is my latest book, Murder in Matrimony, and it is the fourth book in the Lady of Letters series, which is set in Victorian London. So my sleuth is a countess, but she's also a secret agony aunt and a secret advice columnist. And so it's a lot of fun to write and research.
Thank you, Mary. Let's go back to Hannah. Hannah, your main characters are Tom and Meg. Tell us about the circumstances that upend their lives. I'm also curious, and Syrie kind of brought this up, is all the different layers to your novel of mystery, romance, and suspense, and how you meld all those together.
So Meg and Tom at the beginning of the book, which you kind of get more backstory as it goes along, but they met when they were young and kind of grew up together a little bit and formed a strong friendship. And then the book starts when they're adults and they're madly and passionately in love. And they just like establish the fact that they're going to get married. And then Meg is attacked at her uncle's apothecary shop. And suddenly she doesn't remember anybody. She doesn't remember Tom. And so that kind of is where the story takes off. She's like struggling to figure out who she is. She's rescued by an elegant lord, and then Tom's trying to find her, and when he does find her, kind of just win her back. But he's very reckless and rash, and she's now kind of timid because she doesn't have her memories. So so that's kind of where the romance comes in. It's set up with some obstacles because she's not sure who she can trust. And then also as he's trying to win her back, people are attacking, and kind of the murder mystery comes in where they're trying to figure out who's sending these anonymous letters, who's committing these murders, and why are they trying to kill Meg.
And how difficult is it? I mean, at this point in your writing career, do you find it kind of routine to mix all those different elements together, or how do you craft it in editing process and getting everything to fit together?
I feel like when I'm plotting a book, those are always the two main ingredients, like murder and romance, that I always like integrate into my plot. And I kind of build everything else around those two things. So usually when I'm writing the story, like it's really easy to just weave them back and forth. And it's a lot of fun too, because the romance is always like really soft and tender, and you get these really warm scenes. And then the suspense and murder, you get a little more gothic and scary with it. So I feel like it's a nice balance to go back and forth, and it kind of it seems to flow naturally as I'm writing.
Thanks, Hannah. I want to go next to Syrie, but we do have a question that would even clear things up for me, since I said I don't generally read this genre. Well, what classifies a regency?
A Regency book? So it is 1811 to 1820 England, and mine are Gothic Regency. So that's kind of I kind of explain Gothic to people because a lot of people are like, oh, like where they wear black lipstick? I'm not, no, not that kind of Gothic. But I kind of explain it like the whole Jane Eyre vibe or the Edgar Allan Poe vibe, where it's kind of like mixing the dread and the terror plus like the romance and like the dark castles or manor, kind of that vibe.
Like a Mary Shelley Frankenstein.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's actually later than the Gothic. There are Gothic regencies, obviously. You guys write great Gothic regencies, but the Regency period is strictly like the Gothic vibe. I think came a little later, didn't it? Like Jane Eyre, that's a bit later, but the Regency period is that period in history, as Hannah said, in England when George III was ill, mad. He was considered the Mad King. And so his oldest son, the infamous Prince Regent, was designated as the regent. He was the regent who was governing at that point since his father was unable to. So the strict regency was from 1811, as you said, to 1820. But there's also the longer regency period, which kind of predates it. It's called the Long Regency. It's kind of loosey-goosey. If you think of the Jane Austen era, that, if you think of Pride and Prejudice or any of those miniseries or the movies, that's kind of establishes very generally the Regency era setting.
Yeah, and Jane
So
Austen's published her books during the Regency
during
era.
the
That's
Regency,
why we're
that's
all
right.
madly obsessed with it.
Right,
It's so
right.
beautiful.
That's really interesting. I had no idea it was so specific to us, exact
Mhm.
Yeah.
years and yeah, how it's linked to a person like that.
Yeah, the Napoleonic War era too, little overlap there, yeah.
Well, Syrie, you had brought up your current novel, Danger at Darkmoor Park, which is, in addition to the series, The Audacious Sisterhood of Smoke and Fire. Can you tell us a little bit more about the series and how we got to the point where you're at with Selena Taylor in Danger at Darkmoor Park?
Sure. So this series, which so far has 3 books, is about 3 bold, bright sister sleuths in Victorian England who are swept up in murder, mystery, and romance and gothic suspense, all set at ancient country manor houses. And in the first book, Mysteries of Pendore Hall, Diana Taylor, sister number 1, she's sent to Cornwall to honor 2 pledges: to solve the mysterious death of the former owner of the coastal estate and to serve as governess to her godmother's niece, an artistic savant who, for some reason, cannot read or write. And while there, she falls in love with the heir to Pendore Hall, a brooding Royal Navy captain who's home on leave with an injury. And because this is a gothic romance inspired by Jane Eyre, of course, he has to be brooding. And she soon finds herself in terrifying danger because someone is trying to kill her before she can discover the truth. And so book 2 is also inspired by some elements of Jane Eyre. There's homages to Jane Eyre through all of these books. The second sister, Athena Taylor, is the headmistress of a school for girls. But the estate's reputation is tainted when a maid is found drowned in the river, which Athena believes was no accident and is tied to a murder committed 9 years earlier. So she investigates, which puts her life in terrible danger. This poor woman is in so much peril throughout this entire book. And so romance heats up. And on the road to achieving truth and justice, there are some shocking twists that I hope will knock your socks off. And the heroine of book 3, Selena Taylor, she also is featured in book 2. And then she gets her own book in book 3. And it was a lot of fun for that book. Instead of being inspired by Jane Eyre, I wrote an homage to Agatha Christie.
It was a lot of fun too.
Well, definitely a lot of very cliffhanger type elements there. Sounds like a lot of fun to put those stories together.
Yes, my aim is to keep people turning pages long into the night so that they cannot go to sleep until they find out what happened.
That's not very nice. Like people have to work the
That's what
next
we
day.
all aim to do.
Vanessa, let's go to you. I'm curious to know more about this Jane Austen link, and does this qualify as fan fiction? How does that work?
Well, there are a lot of as we know, Jane Austen only wrote, and Syrie, correct me on this one, 6 novels. She wrote 6 novels, and they're much beloved. And she created, very in-depth characterizations, wonderful social comedies, romances. But and she was a fantastic writer. Of course, her prose is just deathless. There's a reason why people still read her in such numbers. And so I think this insatiable desire for more Austen has created homages of various types, a surprising number of murder mysteries, but romances, gentler books. But there are a fair number of murder mysteries set with Austen's. Well, there are a couple that are actually Jane Austen is the sleuth. They're
Right.
really good. And but more generally, what you see are various characters from the novels serving in one form or another as amateur sleuths. And Austen's novels themselves work really well to generate that kind of fiction because, in many respects, and this thought isn't original to me, but a number of Austen scholars will tell you this, that Austen's novels actually carry, they use a lot of detective novel elements or mystery novel elements. There's almost always a mystery in a Jane Austen novel. There are secrets, and they're not dead bodies. They're not that kind of mystery, obviously, but there are villains. There are young women. There are heroines who are, in fact, in many cases, intensely vulnerable. And what they need to do is figure out what's going to happen to their life and who in their life they can trust. And are the various men courting them or paying them attention trustworthy? And so there's always a mystery for the heroine to solve. There's always a villain lurking in the background somewhere. And Austen uses a lot of red herrings, characters who you think are good people turn out to be not so good people. So she'll sprinkle little clues throughout her novels. And particularly in the case of the Emma Knightley mysteries, Emma makes for a fantastic amateur sleuth because I think of all of Jane Austen's heroines, she is number one, the most curious. She's like the classic nosy Parker. And so she has an insatiable curiosity to find out what's going on in her world. And I think the other thing that's attractive about Austen's novels and makes them work as a mystery is that usually, with the exception of Northanger Abbey, which is set in Bath, most her novels are set in villages. So they're kind of very tight communities. Like Syrie's novels are set in a very tight community, or it's like in your recent novel, you're snowed in. You're literally snowed in. And in a way, Austen's novels produce that kind of claustrophobic feeling as well. There's kind of, it's this peaceful little village, but there's also a claustrophobic element to it, which really makes it a great setting for a murder mystery. And then you layer this person on top of it who has this insatiable curiosity to know what's going on all the time. And so that makes Emma a great heroine or a great amateur sleuth. But I think the love of Austen, I mean, there are so many different movie versions of the Austen novels. There are miniseries. People just love Austen and her world. So it's allowed a lot of us to kind of expand that world, which has been a lot of fun for me.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. That was such a great explanation. I had no idea everything that went into that. So thank you for explaining that. I'm going to post a link in the chat. Somebody did ask, what's Vanessa's book called again? So just in case anyone is wondering, there's her book there. And I posted the link to the landing page with all of our panelist novels if you want to go check those out. Mary, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit more about your protagonist, Countess Amelia Amesbury, and this is part 4 of your series, is that right?
Yes, so this is the fourth book in the series, and my amateur sleuth, is a countess. It's set later than Vanessa's book, but Syrie, I can't remember when your book is set. Yours is in the Victorian era, so mine is 1860 London, and it was really an interesting time because you think about all the changes and all the upheaval in the Victorian era that came after, and really it's a time when people were trying to navigate these changes, and the Victorian era had a lot of rules and a lot of social mores that people were trying to navigate, and areas that they weren't necessarily familiar with. And so they turned to agony aunts, or what we would call advice columnists, like, our Ann Landers or Dear Abbey, of the Victorian era, and they would ask questions. I mean, the columns looked very different in this era. They really answered so many different questions, agony aunts did in this era, that it's just the research is that I did is astonishing, because we get a lot of relationship questions, I think, in our advice columns today, which they did in that era too. But there were all kinds of questions that were being asked, because people were, there were so many changes, and they weren't changes that they just felt comfortable maybe reaching out to their neighbors and asking, or having a conversation about. And so my sleuth is the Countess, but she also has this secret pseudonym of Lady Agony, and that's where that pseudonym comes from, because she is a secret agony columnist for a penny paper. So, being a lady, being a member of the peerage, she definitely wouldn't have had a job, that would have been frowned upon. And so this is like an occupation that she keeps in secret, and she does, in secret. So she receives letter from the penny paper, and she answers them. And this all happened, in the first book. One of her childhood friends is an editor at a penny paper and lost his agony columnist, and that's sort of how she took up the work. She's widowed, so she was only married for a couple of months. And so this work is really something that's been meaningful to her since she had lost her husband on this, what she thought was going to be a grand adventure. So in the first book, Murder and Postscript, that came out, this is really how she begins to think of, this is how she becomes a sleuth, because one of her readers writes into her and says, "Hey, I think my mistress was murdered." And the woman is a lady's maid, and she thinks she's seen something. And so Amelia goes to meet her because she thinks she's the only person who could possibly, help this reader, because she's a, servant. She doesn't want to go to her anybody in the house. And so she goes to meet her, and she discovers that she is murdered. So that's kind of how she starts on her way as being an amateur sleuth, through her letters at the penny paper. And so by the time we get to the fourth book, we have a different scenario, in that she is not only trying to help her younger sister get married, but she's also solving the murder of her friend and vicar, Mr. Cross. So yeah, that's a little bit about the sleuth and a little bit about the series to catch you up if you haven't read it.
Lara actually has a question for you. How do you spell the name of the occupation,
Oh,
the
agony aunt.
columnist?
Yeah, so just like the word agony, Agony, like agony aunt. Like
Interesting.
an aunt. Yeah. So, and I think when we think of agony today, I think we think of almost painful physical agony, anguish. It was almost used in that period as a problem. So a problem that it would be an agony.
Hannah, let's go back to you. I did want to ask you a little bit about Gothic style Regency, but we kind of covered that. So I want to ask you about, you're in West Virginia. I went to college in West Virginia and Appalachia. There's a really beautiful region. Does it inspire any of your writing? Your novel, The Red Cottage, it looks like it's kind of a rural setting. Does that your where you live, does that inspire your writing at all?
Not directly, especially not like the Regency novels because the setting's so different. Um, but I definitely feel like my love for country living and just like a simple life, definitely comes out in my novels. And I noticed that like a lot of my novels, I'll like, have a lot of scenes in the country and have the characters just really loving nature and loving that quietness. So.
Um, so we talked in the pre-interview a little bit. You're kind of surrounded by nature, but you don't get out and hike all that much.
Yeah, not that much. I should more than I do.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Syrie. You had brought up Agatha Christie. How does it feel to be compared? Because readers and reviews compare you to Agatha Christie style novels. Is that something you're shooting for? How does it feel to have that comparison made?
It is a huge compliment when people compare me or my work to Agatha Christie because I think she's brilliant. And
Yeah.
yes, I absolutely use her as a model. When I write a mystery, I study her books and her plays to see how she delivers her twists and turns, and then I do my best to create a similar level of tension and to give as many shocking twists as I can. And I love her murder mysteries, especially the ones that are set in a secluded location. We call it a locked door mystery where everybody's, contained in a single environment. And that's what I did with Danger at Darkmoor Park. But that's literally inspired by Agatha Christie's most famous play, The Mousetrap, which is the longest running play in the world. And that play has a bunch of people who are snowbound at a country estate where a murder takes place. And so I took that, which is, not that unique of a premise, but still she does everything very cleverly. And I took her premise and I ran with it and I changed it up and made it completely different, made it my own story. And my romantic hero arrives out of the snowstorm, just like her detective arrives in that story, but my character is completely different. And also, just so you know, this book was also inspired in part by a story that my husband told me about something that happened to one of his relatives, a scandalous family story. But since it's a plot spoiler, I'm not going to say any more. You'll just have to read the book.
Is he a bit of a storyteller as well?
Oh, he was. He is no longer with us, to my great sadness. But he was a great storyteller, and I have so many stories to tell. I need about another 100 years to tell them.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Vanessa, you're such a prolific writer. All of you are. Um, what is you? How do you stay so productive? What is your process like? When you finish a novel, when do you start on the next one? Do you have the ideas rolling around all the time? Just talk about that process a little bit, Vanessa.
Yeah. When I started, just you had in one of your written questions to me, Colin, you had asked me about my V.K. Sykes books. I actually wrote those books with my husband under the pen name of V.K. Sykes, and those were romantic suspense novels and contemporary romance. And then I also wrote historical romance that was fairly heavy on mystery. I remember one review I got that said, for one of my historical romances, that said, this is really more of a mystery than a romance. And I thought, oh, maybe I ought to be shifting more toward the mystery side than the romance side. So I'm a very detailed writer. I do a lot of pre-writing because I don't want to be halfway through a book and writing a book and slam into a wall because I don't know where the plot's going. I've never been one of those writers who can just write, go into the mist. I envy that. I envy the ability to just sit down. I have friends who can do that, where they can just sit down and start writing, and it becomes clear, the path becomes clear as they go along. That's not me. So I will spend about a month to 6 weeks pre-writing. I do character biographies. I work out an extensive plot. I do outlines. I do a lot of my research. I usually focus on the one element of the research that I need to for that particular story. So for Murder at Donwell Abbey, for instance, there's a smuggling subplot. So I needed to do a fair amount of research on smuggling during Regency England. And so when I am ready to write, I usually have something like a 15 or a 20-page single-spaced synopsis, which my editor insists on. For one thing, I have to do it. He wants to know that I actually know where I'm going with the book. But it's helpful for me too. And that's not to say I don't depart from the synopsis, because I also tend to write very long books, too long, and I have to start chopping halfway through. And I do always kind of have a running, particularly with a series, I am always kind of thinking ahead to the next book. So for instance, with something like Murder in Highbury or the Emma Knightley Mysteries, I mentioned that they take place in a very small village, Highbury. And there are only so many murder victims or suspects you can have in a village that small. And so I'm thinking ahead to the next book. Maybe I'll move it out to Bath, what other characters I can introduce. So, and of course, then when you hand your book in for production, you start your next book, but then the book you finished comes back to you in edits. So you're always working on 2 or 3 books at a time, I find. And so I have to be really focused in the beginning stages of the book, and get everything lined up so I don't get lost in the writing as copy edits come in or other ideas come in, or my editor says, can you give me cover copy for the next book you're doing? So for me, I have notebooks. I have files on my computer. I have to really stay organized, in other words. And I do even have notebooks with like tabs, like biography, research, plot, possible scenes. That's the only way I can make it work. I think I'd have a nervous breakdown if I didn't really organize myself and stick to a schedule. And I write almost every day. I try to write at least a couple of hours every day too.
Vanessa, this is so interesting and exciting to me, because every single thing you said is exactly the way I work. And I can't imagine writing a book without a very detailed outline.
I'd have a nervous breakdown.
Ladies, we need to have a writer's retreat. The
Yeah.
4 of us get together and
That'd be great.
Yes.
really exciting.
Are you disappointed at all just hearing how much time and organization goes into putting it all together? Obviously, you want your readers to be engaged and entertained, but if they read the book in a day or two, does it disappoint you that it took so long to write it and takes so little to consume it?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I wish I was one of those. I'm not a fast writer. I mean, I can have spurts where I can, get 3,000 or 4,000 words down in one day, which might not be fast for some people. It is for me. I wish it wasn't so agonizing, but that's just what it is for me. And the most important thing is that the reader enjoy the book. That's if they enjoy the book and it, kind of takes them away from their problems of life for a little bit, then I'm happy with it. But yeah, sometimes I wish it was a little easier to write a book. I mean, the best part of a book for me is getting to the end of it. I'm sorry, I have to say it. The end, the best words to write.
It must feel good. Well, Mary, you have a background in literature and like literary fiction. Can you talk about some of the differences between between that and these mystery genres that you write, and how your background helps kind of deepen the writing for these what you're writing now?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's fascinating, by the way, also just to hear the different writing process too. I'm glad to hear that it can be as painstaking for everybody else as it is for for me. But I also outline, maybe not that detailed though. I don't know how long my outline
Yeah,
is.
I'm a maniac.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I do have a little history in literary and creative writing. I've written short stories for as especially my short stories, I would say, are probably more literary in nature. I've had those out at different places like Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine.
Mm.
I've also written cozy mysteries. In fact, I was writing the Happy Camper Cozy Mystery series for Kensington when I took my trip to London and got inspired to write this series. So I think I really, I don't read heavily in just one genre. I read a lot of and teach literary fiction, uh, biography, short fiction. I read romance, suspense, just so many different stories. I love stories, and I think that in and of itself probably enriches my writing, and that and it probably could be a good thing or a bad thing in some respects, that I don't fall into some of the same habits, or my character, not me, but my characters don't necessarily follow all the same conventions, or fall down the same rabbit holes as some um, characters will. That if maybe you're writing in a single genre or reading a single genre, so I hope that it diversifies the character, I guess, and just enriches them and makes them feel real for the reader. Um, because for me, it's always about the character and what their story is, and it doesn't matter to me what genre it is, as long as their story holds true for them.
I think that's great. Kind of echoes what Vanessa said about, well, ultimately, as long as the reader's enjoying the story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I've got plenty more questions for our panelists. If you have a question, go ahead and post that in the chat, and I'll get to as many as I can. I did want to ask Hannah, you also do cover design, is that right? Is that so I work with a lot of authors, and they don't always have a good eye for design. Um, Tell me about how you got into it, and how much say do you have in your own covers?
Mhm. So I remember when I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and we were at a football game, and like I was not into football, so of course I was sitting there being a nerd and reading a book. But I was sitting on the bleachers holding this book, and it had this beautiful picture of a woman with the background faded into or a castle faded into the background. And I just sat there and studied it, and I thought, like, how in the world did somebody like put this picture with this faded castle, and it's just so beautiful? And I thought, like, it'd be so fun to be the person that gets to do that, because a fiction book is usually no pictures, and so the cover is like the only visual you have. And so I just thought, what a special thing to be able to be the person that gives the book its visual. And so as I would write my own books, because I wrote and self-published my first book at 12, and continued to write
Wow.
and self-publish about 10 more. And so I would just kind of do my own cover. And so I kind of got into it from doing my own. And then at some point I went to college, got a graphic design degree, and then in 2019 officially launched the business. And I work for publishers and individual authors, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really happy I feel like I'm living my dreams.
That's amazing. Are you looking for more clients?
Always. Yep.
And you kind of buried the lead there. You said, "Oh, I wrote a book at 12 years old."
Really?
So what inspired you? Like, how did you even accomplish that at such a young age?
It was interesting because I feel like I always liked to write. It didn't really click for me. I was homeschooled all the way through, and my mom would give me writing assignments, and I would just stay in there. Like, I just keep doing it, and she'd pop her head back in like hours after school was over and be like, you can be done now. Like, what are you doing? But I didn't really like know that I love to write. And then when I was 12, my mom got a Christmas letter from a relative, and she said that my second cousin was writing a novel, and she was my age. And I just remember thinking it never occurred to me that somebody my age could write a book. And I was like, I think I'll do that. And so the first chapter in, I was just completely hooked. I loved it.
Good for you. That's great. Syrie, you also have many talents. Mary was talking about how she can diversify her writing through different genres. You don't just write different genres, but different forms and screenwriting and playwriting. Can you talk about how you got into those and what the differences are and challenges are of stepping outside of the novel format?
Well, sure. I just want to say, Hannah, I actually wrote my first play at age 7. Yay! And it didn't occur to me at age 7 that that was a weird or unusual thing to do. And then I started to write my first book in 6th grade when I asked for a typewriter because I wanted to be a novelist. And I got about halfway through and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And that is when I learned the value of an outline. And I have never, ever tried to write anything without an outline ever since. And so I continue to write plays and short stories all the way through school and college. I just love writing in all different genres. I like historical fiction because to me it's like time traveling. I get to step back in time and get inside the heads of my characters and imagine what it was like to live in that era. And the research is so much fun. And I like romance because no matter what the era, everyone always is looking for that soulmate to spend their life with. And I like mysteries because it's so much fun to plot out the story and the red herrings and the clues and, give us that wonderful twist. So writing in different genres is just something that allows me to spread my wings and do different things, which is why I'm also a screenwriter and a playwright. I've sold 20 screenplays to film and television, and my new stage play, Jane Austen in 89 Minutes, a comedy. I had the great pleasure of directing it at a professional theater in Beverly Hills, and it's now published and available for licensing for theaters around the world, which was a dream since age 7 when I wrote that first play. So I balance all these crafts by just focusing on one at a time. When I was asked to direct my play, that's something you never would turn down. I was in the middle of writing a novel and I had to massage my due date for that novel in order to have time to then direct my play. But I made them both happen and it was just the joy of my life. So it's really fun doing all these different things.
It sounds like it. Sherry says saw the play and it was delightful. Do you have any advice for writers who want to get in? Like, it's one thing to write a screenplay, but to actually sell one, how do you even start?
Oh, well, I was very lucky that when I wrote my first screenplay, I didn't know a single person in Hollywood, had no idea what I was going to do. And I gave it to a cousin of mine who said, "Oh, yeah, I have a friend who's a screenwriter. I'll give it to him." And it just happened to be the one year that that screenwriter had his own TV series. And so he handed it to the lowest person on the totem pole in his company, and it just kept moving up the ranks until his VP of development handed it to him and said, "Jim, you have to read this." And he did, and he called me up and said, "I want you to write for my TV show. Would you come in tomorrow?" So that was like a fairy tale story, which never happens to anybody and probably never will again. It's a very difficult business. I actually don't recommend it to anyone. It's very hard to get a paying gig in Hollywood right now. So if you have a day job, keep it and be grateful, because, you know, writing screenplays is really hard and making any money at it is really difficult, which is the same for playwriting. Apparently, it is impossible to get a play published. So I am still not sure how I got so lucky that my play is published and out there, but I'm really grateful.
Well, good for you for getting out there and doing it and taking on those challenges. I I work at a pizza restaurant I have for many years, and we always have one or two or three actors who are also pizza delivery drivers, and, you know, and we have a good scene here, and I'm in Minneapolis, and we have the Guthrie and a lot of theaters, and yeah, to in between auditions and between plays, they deliver pizza.
Right. Welcome
Well,
to the world of the creative artist.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Vanessa, as long as Syrie and Hannah have told us about how they got started, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and where it all started for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was another really fortunate writer like Syrie. I actually came initially from academia. I have a master's degree in English literature, and I spent several years in the PhD program in English literature at the University of Toronto. Um, and I was in grad school at the time where oh good Kitty, hi Kitty. I
Oh,
was
that's
in
a cute
grad school
kid.
at a time where jobs were starting to dry up. So I transitioned to research, and I was a professional researcher. And at a certain point in my career, I had to go off for health reasons. And I thought, I'm going to go crazy if I don't do something. I can't just sit at home and not feel well. And for me, writing was actually both emotional, it was mental, emotional, and physical therapy. It had a lot to do with, um, restoring myself both physically and mentally. So I'd always loved the Regency era. I loved the novels of, we always joke, people joke and say she's the gateway drug to historical romance. Georgette Hare, who was a marvelous writer and pretty much created the Regency historical genre
Nice cat.
novel. And so I started writing a historical romance that also had a mystery. I've always had mystery elements in my book. And so I wrote this historical romance. I joined a local writing group, but like Syrie, I was talking to a friend one day who taught at a local community college, and she said, "Oh, they have a really good literary agency." It was Humber College in Toronto. And they actually, publish. They had a good writing program, and they published their students' work, and they had a literary agent. She said, "Give me the manuscript. I'm going to give it to the agent." The agent really, she'd never repped historical romance before, but she really liked the book. And she said, "Well, I'm going to show it to my friend John Scognamilia, who was the editor in chief of Kensington." And she showed it to him, and the book sold. And so I got my agent, and the book sold within 3 months of each other. And which, as Syrie says, never happens. That kind of stuff just never happens. It's like a lightning strike. And so I have published other things with other publishing houses, but I've been with Kensington since 2009 with my historical romances. And actually, the Emma Knightley Mysteries was my editor's idea. I can't take credit for it. I said I wanted to write mysteries. And he said, "Well, what about, what if Jane Austen's Emma was an amateur sleuth?" And I just thought, bingo, that's the idea. So I've been very fortunate, like Syrie, to kind of just be in the right place at the right time with the right, you have to have the right book. You have to have the book that somebody wants, or the screenplay, or the play. But I'm really grateful that I had such a kind of not necessarily smooth, but pretty rapid start to my career. I was really lucky in that respect.
Well, and you still have to do the work and you still have to put yourself out there and
Oh, yeah.
see what happens. And that's how miracles happen, is by putting yourself out there.
Mhm.
Mary, you were inspired by a trip to London that got you writing in the Victorian era. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that trip and how it inspired you? Maybe introduce us to your cat, since everyone seems to love it so much.
Yeah, well, I didn't dare put him down because, he will bite me if I try to.
Oh.
But there he is. He's my
It's a
big
nice
ginger.
cat.
What's his name?
His name is O'Malley.
That's a cute
And
name.
I like
yeah,
that name.
well, we named him O'Malley after O'Malley the alley cat in Aristocats because
Great
we
name.
we found him on the street like 3 years ago. So yeah, he's our alley cat, and that's how we came up with his name. But anyway, he's a good cat, but a very spoiled cat. Um, but my series idea came from a trip to London. I was lucky to go with my family in 2019 before COVID. I was so glad I took the trip. My daughters were younger at the time, and I kind of questioned if they could do the overseas flight, and they could, and they were champs, and they went to all the literary places that I wanted to go. They went to Stratford upon Avon and Greenway and all those places, Bath, that I wanted to visit. And but it was really London for me that brought back all these just my, when I was young, I read so many Regency romances, historical romances, and Victorian romances, and seeing Piccadilly for myself, seeing Hyde Park, um, you know, seeing Regent's Park, it was like I was walking through these novels again. And it's not like I didn't still read those at the time. I was writing my cozy mystery series, so I was probably reading more modern mysteries at the time. But it was like an awakening of how much I love this era. And I just thought I have to try this. I didn't even know if I could do it. I came home from that trip, and at the time, I had also read a book, coincidentally, called Never Kiss a Man in a Canoe. And it was all about the early agony aunts of the Victorian and Regency era, and what they're like, that was one of their advice: never kiss a man in a canoe. And it happened to be the title of a book. And so these two things just kind of coincided. And so I I wrote 25 pages of this book, sent it to my agent, and she liked it and said, "Yeah, keep writing. This sounds really great." And so this series has been like a dream of mine, really come true to write it, because I have such a love, such an appreciation for the era. And so just to be creating art alongside all these other amazing artists it's great.
And this is one of the great perks of being an author and writing things that are set in England. We get an excuse to go to England for research trips as often as we want. And it's so much fun. I just spent 4 weeks in England, and you're surrounded by history everywhere you look. I was in Windsor Castle's Cathedral at Evensong, and I was just sitting there listening to this beautiful music, and I looked down, and at my feet, in the marble floor, was inscribed, "Here lie the remains of King Henry VIII and his wife Jane Seymour." And I'm just thinking, people are just walking over this, and it's right in front of me. And so it's easy to imagine what it was like 100 or 200 years ago when we were writing our novels, because if you just imagine away all of the electric lines and cars, you could see the buildings are still the same.
Mhm.
I still haven't got to go, and it's on my bucket list. I'm
Oh.
still like in the stage where I'm like looking up Google Earth and taking the street view of places to like get it
Yeah.
in my mind. But I would love to go soon, someday.
All right,
Google
and
Earth is a blessing to the writer.
Yes, it is.
I
Yeah.
know.
I have a dog named Port.
okay. If you could stay muted unless you have a specific question, please.
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
That's all right. Well, we're up against the hour here, so I want to wrap things up. But before we do, I want to thank everyone for attending. I'm so glad that we're able to have this event, and I'm so glad for your attendance. Thank you so much to our panelists. Congratulations on your work on your novels. It's really wonderful to talk to you about them. And finally, just to wrap up, I always like to ask about the value of historical fiction, but let's change it up a little bit and just ask, like, all of you have talked about how you've been inspired by other authors and other artists. Talk about the value of you sitting down and spending the time to do the research and do the work, and what you hope that might inspire for future readers. Hannah, can you start us off?
Yeah. I think it's just a really beautiful way to kind of keep history alive. And like it's funny, like the rabbit holes that research will take you down, and like different things that you can discover and put into your manuscript that people are going to read that they probably maybe would never even know about if you hadn't inserted it in your book. So I think it's neat.
Thanks, Hannah. And how about you, Syrie?
Oh, like I said, I just want people to feel like they're time traveling,
Mhm.
because that's the only way we could do it. We could watch a movie that's set in the past, and that's a wonderful way to bring that to life. But when you're reading a book, it's all in your mind. It's all through words on a page. So to me, it's like magic. If we can create a story and an environment and have you hear it and smell it and feel it, then that's a sort of like a gift that I like to give to my readers.
Thanks, Syrie. And Vanessa, what do you hope your work inspires?
Well, one thing I think I'd say, first of all, about my books, The Emma Knightley Mysteries, is you don't need to have read Jane Austen or Emma to read my books. I am writing them for the general reader. But if my books can inspire you to go read more Jane Austen or read your first Jane Austen novel, I would be really happy, because the Regency is a wonderful period. It has a lot to teach us. Jane Austen has a lot to teach us about life. There was no one who understood character or the human heart better than Jane Austen. So if my books can lead people to Austen, I would be thrilled by that. So
That's a wonderful ambition. And finally, you, Mary, what do you hope your work inspires?
Um, I think like all the writers here, I mean it's a way to learn about history, but also I think to deal with the challenges of our own time. I think a lot of the sleuths and characters here, they're very strong-minded, independent women that they had a lot of challenges in their time period, and I think there's a lot to admire and a lot to learn from, that you might not expect going into a historical, Victorian, Regency, romance, mystery. But I think there's a lot that modern men and women can identify with, their challenges, and find ways to overcome and deal with them in these novels in a comforting way.
Well put. Well, thanks again to everybody. I'm so glad we're able to do this tonight. I hope that everyone can check out your novels, maybe pick them up as Christmas gifts, or find them at their library. We will be doing another What's New in Historical Fiction in January. I don't remember the exact date, so just follow History Through Fiction on Eventbrite, and you'll get a notification once we put up our next event. So thanks again to everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
thank you.
This has been great.
Thank you.
I've read all the new books by every one of these
Hi,
ladies.
guys.
They're wonderful. I recommend you go check them out.
Thank you.
Good night.